We have now begun.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
My name is Zen.
My name's Kaya, and we are presenting I Was Thinking. Now, this podcast, I guess would say, is about oddities, curiosities, and just some odd stories or facts.
Things you don't typically think about, or things you think about way too much. Who knows?
It's true. So today, we have a themed cocktail called Trippy Traffic Lights. Lovely little color here. And our subject is going to be the history on magic mushrooms. So, let's get into it. Let's start with the history. So, the first sighting of magic mushrooms dated back to 10,000 BC in North Australia. There is actually drawings on caves' walls that seem to be psychedelic themed. Linking shrooms to Homo sapiens from a professor, Terence McKenna, who did the stone ape hypothesis, saying that it actually doubled the size of our brains over time of regular use and helped us reach technological advances along with traditions, language, spirituality, and religion. So that's pretty cool. Many drawings in the Central America would be mushrooms, and they thought that it was a way to communicate with the gods, which is super interesting. Not surprising, though. The Mayans and Aztecs use a language called Nahuatl. Forgive me if I mispronounce. Google told me. Nahuatl. Yes. But they named these mushrooms Teonanakit, which was meaning flesh of the gods, believing that it was a gift from their ancestors by the god. The god's name was, forgive me if I say this wrong, Quetzalcoatl. Yeah, long word. Yeah. But he was seen as the creator of all life. Now, a Siberian tribe was using mushrooms as well, but not the same type of mushroom. Go ahead. What's the type of mushroom? I always say it wrong.
Psilocybin.
Psilocybin, yes. So, actually, they were using the red and white mushrooms. So those, like, poisonous ones that, like, kill you. Yeah, they were using those.
Are you talking about, like, the Amanita muscaria?
That is exactly what I'm talking about.
The ones that are in Mario Bros.
Yep,
actually,
Mario
the ones
Bros.
that make you grow up. Yeah, not grow up, but, like, grow in size, you know.
Yeah. So, actually, reindeers are known for eating these kinds of mushrooms. But what they started doing is actually taking the urine from the reindeer and drinking it.
Okay. So I have a theory that I'm actually not going to touch, really. So I'm going to mention that real quick. They have a theory that Santa was started by mushrooms, like psychedelic mushrooms.
How does that come out?
Let me find my notes for that. My messy ones. So like during the winter solstice, shamans in Siberia would collect mushrooms underneath birch trees, dry them out on branches, and they would distribute them to villagers as gifts. But because the heavy snow would frequently block front entrances of the village's homes, the shamans, dressed in red and white, would, to honor the mushroom that they're collecting, would throw bags of fungus through an opening in the roofs because they can't get to the doors. And the flying reindeer, like you mentioned, they would also eat the
reindeer.
Yeah, flying reindeer. They would also consume the Amanita muscaria, and the shamans would drink their urine to avoid the toxicity in the raw mushroom. And in the psychedelic state, you know, it's not hard to believe that there are flying reindeer.
You know, that makes 100%
when you're
to me.
Hallucinating.
You know, I think it's funny because imagine just like chilling in the olden days with like your little fire going. You're like, oh man, this is so nice. And then this guy in red and white just comes by and is like, here, you're gonna see flying reindeer.
Doesn't even knock, just throws a bag of fucking shrooms through your roof.
You know, Merry Christmas to all. And to all a good night. So after we found out, you know, that they were actually drinking the urine of reindeer because it holds all the psychedelic properties, it actually wasn't just used for spiritual and psychedelic uses, but for practical and survival reasons. So whenever they would take this urine, they would drink it and they would be able to exceed normal physical capacities, like extreme temperatures, and actually, like, pain in their bodies would go away. So, how this works, actually, is this specific mushroom turns off parts of your brain and receptors. So, you are not bothered by certain things because your brain said, oh, well, it's not here anymore. You know what I mean? That's super crazy. But...
yeah, kind of like my trauma response, you know?
So actually these red and white mushrooms are a lot different than the average shroom mushroom, because the effects are different on your brain. They target completely different parts, and actually this red and white mushroom have less structured hallucinations, and it's more compared to lucid dreaming. But later on, a sculpture was found in Guatemala in about 300 BC, and it was shaped like a mushroom and had the remains of a hallucinogenic drug being used for poisoning ceremonies.
Oh,
yeah.
Poisoning ceremonies.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about that sometime. That seems pretty interesting in itself.
Well, I'm going to touch on this. So
okay.
Hold on to your seats, okay?
I'm holding on.
During these ceremonies, it actually would intoxicate you and anesthesize you to stop you from feeling the pain of these blood sacrifices that they would do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, a lot of them were decorated with animals for some reason. Maybe it was reindeer. Who knows?
The flying reindeer.
But these blood sacrifices actually show up in the Roman history in Greece, which I think is super interesting. So in Greece, they were some wild mother truckers. Like they were just off their rocker. So there was actually these cults that would worship Demeter and Persephone and their story. And while they held these ceremonies, they would combine psilocybin, ergot fungus, along with the Amanita muscaria, and like just mix it all together with some barley and mint and drink it. So that's pretty crazy.
Some otherworldly shroom tea, I suppose.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the concoction was actually called Kaikian, which I think is interesting.
That sounds like a Pokemon.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So the ceremonies were called the Eleusinian Mysteries, and they were done secret, actually, within the cult. So, like, they did the ceremonies with the LSD stuff, but they didn't tell everybody that secretly they were taking them down to a blood sacrificing dungeon.
Wait, so they were sacrificing these people for Demeter and Persephone?
Yes.
But they were, okay.
But they weren't telling people they were sacrificing people.
It's like, all right, let's have a party, guys.
So, okay, here comes the crazy part, okay?
It's not even crazy yet. Okay.
No, this is where the crazy part comes in. Your mind just is gonna go, poof, you know what I mean? Okay, so, I thought that continuing on.
Okay.
You were not allowed to talk about these cults. Like, one rule of psychedelic blood sacrifices.
You don't talk about Fight Club.
We don't talk about psychedelic blood sacrifices club. Okay? But these blood sacrifices actually had an audience. A lot of upper class members, scholars, artists, and philosophers would attend. You want to guess who?
Why is this reminding me of our government currently?
Ooh. Well, maybe we'll talk about that on another episode.
Whatever.
But Plato, Homer, and Aristotle were all people who sat and watched these blood sacrifices.
Some of our best philosophers. Okay.
Yep, that is true.
Okay. What the fuck, guys?
And actually, they talked about it in a lot of their work, saying that it was really inspirational in a way, really opened your eyes. That
kind of makes that reminds me of the book where I was telling you about how their execution went, how they had the atom. Yeah, that.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to tell you guys the story of why they were doing this, okay? So the story of the goddess, Demeter was a goddess of nature, and she had a daughter named Kor, who was kidnapped and sexually assaulted by Hades.
Which, hold on, fun fact. Kor means, it's something that has to do with spring, but when you get later into the story,
it'll make more sense.
Yeah, no,
Sherry knows the story.
Yeah.
But she was sexually assaulted and kidnapped by Hades. And Demeter was looking for her daughter all over, and she actually stopped and rested in a city at a well. This is where the original ceremonies of drinking the Kykeon would take place. They usually would do it at the well, which was a normal thing. Like I said, they would do that, which was fine, but they didn't tell people that they were secretly taking them down and making blood sacrifices. Yeah.
Let's have a party, guys.
Yep. So, Demeter actually disguised as an old woman and took care of the queen's son and was bathing him in fire so that he could be immortal. Yeah.
Bathing the baby in fire?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, so that he would be immortal.
That checks out. When you have your first child, I want it to be
yeah.
immortal, so I'm going to bathe it in fire. No,
Okay.
I'm not. That's terrible. Don't do that.
So
Don't do that.
Obviously, the queen saw this and, like, freaked the fuck out. She was like, bro, what the hell are you doing with my baby, and why are you putting him in fire? You know what I mean? But Demeter, because she was disguised as an old woman, she came out of her disguise and was, like, angry as all hell. Like, she was like, fuck this, fuck that, rah. You know what I mean? And so the people built her a temple, and she was, after they built her the temple, she was teaching the queen's son, who she was trying to make immortal, agriculture.
Agriculture?
Agriculture.
Agriculture?
Yeah, it's okay. We'll cut that part out.
Agriculture.
So
Do we
Zeus,
do too?
yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Zeus wasn't happy because of the grief that Demeter was feeling, because crops were dying, people were starving, and the gods, I feel like this is the most important part to him, the gods were not getting their tribute from the people. So...
Well, obviously Zeus only cares about himself.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Classic man.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Zeus.
Zeus...
King of gods.
Zeus finally convinces Hades to let Kor go. However, Hades was being a total douche, and he tricked Kor into eating pomegranate seeds. And the thing with the pomegranate seeds is if you eat them in the land of the dead, you stay there. So now there was a deal made. Basically, they had split custody over Kor. She was able to spend half of the year with her mom.
That's because she ate 6
Yeah.
of the pomegranate
Yep.
seeds. Can't forget that.
Sorry,
Can't
only
forget mentioning
6.
that.
Sorry.
If we're going to touch Greek
Okay.
history, we
Okay.
got to touch it.
There will be another episode on that, sneak peek.
Ooh.
But so she would spend half the year with her mom and half the year with Hades, and that's where the
Idea
seasons came
spring
from.
comes from, yep.
Because you have the months where it's nice and warm and things grow, and then things die because of Demeter's grief of not being with her daughter. So there's that. But the myth carried to the conception of transformation, and there is life after death because there is no truly death. So that's why a lot of, Plato and all those people took it seriously and were like, oh, well,
So, are you touching on Kor again? Okay, well, what I was mentioning with Kor, her name started off with, being a name relating to spring or birth or whatever. I can't remember it. But her name was later changed to Bringer of Death because...
Oh, yes, yep.
Yeah, Persephone, because she killed a bunch of mortals. Because they were disrespecting another god, some of their, what their beliefs and stuff, whatever. Anyways, continue.
Yes. So she came back as Persephone, and that's when this whole ordeal happened. Now, moving on to the Egyptians, they were pretty similar to the indigenous tribes that we talked about before. They considered these magic mushrooms to be food of the gods and son of the gods, all that jazz. And they believed since it didn't come from a seed, it was put on earth by Osiris.
I have a book. You guys should check it out sometimes. It's called Awakening. The Awakening of Osiris. I'll let you read it sometime. It's pretty good. Yeah, I hope you don't mind notes because there are notes in it. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So, at this time, only priests and upper class could actually have them because they were saw as rich people were seen as descendants from the gods at that time. So yeah, that's Egyptian history. The earliest documentation of Western use, however, I think that this story is just a little bit funny. In 1799, It involved a British family who picked the mushrooms not knowing what the effects were. They made them into a meal and fed their entire family.
How many kids did they have in their family?
I'm assuming like 5 or 6.
Oh, God.
They were all
period?
1799.
You said that.
They were tripping hardcore and had no idea what was happening.
That's...
Yeah.
Imagine just...
Yeah.
I actually had an ex who, he had never done shrooms or anything like that. And his friend asked him if he wanted a pizza because he worked at a pizza place. And Jake was like, fuck yeah, I want a pizza, whatever. His friend asked him if he liked mushrooms, and him being who he was like, yeah, I like mushrooms, whatever, doesn't matter. They weren't just any regular mushrooms, and he ate the pizza, and he thought when he was telling me the story, he was like, oh yeah, it was weird because, like, obviously they weren't regular mushrooms, but I didn't question it very much. And then my friend later explained to me, and I was in for a ride, and I just... Man.
He did an old switcheroo on him.
Oh, yeah. That ex was funny, though, because, you know, life is beautiful. Everything is great.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I mean, at least he was happy for once.
Yeah, happy.
So, the term actually magic mushroom wasn't even introduced until 100 years later after that incident in 1957 in Life magazine, actually.
Life would be the one.
Mm-hmm.
Life.
It was referred to by a mycologist named R. Gordon Wasson, who in 1955, as well as his wife, became the first Westerners allowed to do an indigenous mushroom ceremony guided by a shaman.
I talk about him too as well, so you'll get more about him later.
But news travels fast about what happened and the mushroom ceremony. And this is where we meet Albert Hofmann, which I'm almost positive she has something to say about him, too.
I actually do not have anything on Albert Hofmann.
Well, let me give you a little insight. So, he was a chemist who was actually famous for discovering LSD itself.
I didn't touch on... I was going to touch on LSD in one of my theories, but it didn't really tie into any of the bigger ones that I have. But I bet if I did.
Oh, yeah. Well, in 1958, Hoffman identified psilocybin and psilocin as active ingredients. So this was like a huge thing for the study of magic mushrooms and LSD.
I believe that would be a big breakthrough for them.
Oh, yeah. So after this, there's a Harvard professor named Timothy Leary who was actually inspired to travel to Mexico and experience the ritual himself. He was very intrigued by it.
Okay.
When he came back to Harvard, he and Richard Alpert, who later became known as Ram Dass, he was kind of weird.
He was kind of weird. He making me think of them weird Russians out there.
Well, he had a spiritual...
We love you, Russians. We love you.
He had a spiritual awakening after this, and then he changed his name to Ram Dass. And if you're watching on YouTube, we have pictures of how crazy his hair looks.
Is it kind of like Einstein's? Does he have that?
Let
Do you think
me just
he has that?
quickly show you what this man looks like. Boop! Right there.
Oh, no, but he definitely got something going on.
Oh, yeah.
I have photos, but I won't be able to show you them right off the bat, but we will add them to the video.
So, after he changed his name to Ram Dass, they actually founded the Harvard Psilocybin Project, believing that these magic mushrooms could solve emotional problems. Because it was legal at this time, they gathered pharmaceutical psilocybin and used it in many experiments. Now, this is where things get a little rocky. Although it seemed from a good place and love of research, there was some questioning on the methods of administering to students participating in the experiments. Students reported feeling pressured to participate in early 1962. There was a student who had to become sedated because of negative reaction to the chemical. After this, there was a meeting with the Harvard professors, and Leary and Alpert were accused of abusing the substance. So, as long as they remained sober, they were allowed to continue their experiment.
So you're telling me they were doing this experiment while
high as all fuck? Yes.
So how are they getting any work done? Like, I'm a research assistant, and like, I don't know. I just get tired and I can't even do my stuff correctly. Like, how are they getting any, like, actual... I want to look at their research. Is any of it accurate? I want to know.
Stay tuned for that, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
So, in 1963, Leary and Albert were actually caught giving substances to undergrads, which was not allowed.
Oh, man.
So, they were dismissed completely and moved to the, again with my pronunciation, Zihuatanejo projects, which was a psychedelic retreat that many applied for, but few got accepted.
Hold on.
What?
Say that again.
Zihuatanejo.
Zihuatanejo?
Yeah.
Zihuatanejo?
Yeah.
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 Okay, continue.
So, in 1971, that's when the war on drugs began, when President Nixon came in, and the psychedelic drugs were banned by the UN. Sad, but true. But
the war on drugs is something else. But I think Oregon, we're kind of ending it a little bit, yeah.
We're crazy. But
Yeah.
the UN specifically banned the molecule psilocybin, but not the spores and mycelium, which are the little root thingy-bobbers. So those were being sold everywhere. Like, they were just openly being sold because technically it wasn't against the law because the UN really didn't get down to the nitty-gritty.
So I want to know what the laws are on it now, because I know that while you were doing research and while I was doing research, that we found ads for seeds.
Yes.
And pores and stuff like that for psilocybin mushrooms.
It's true. Because psilocybin itself, so the ingredient itself is illegal. However, the spores, which contain psilocybin,
If you grow them.
are not illegal.
Is it because, like, if you were just to consume the spore, it wouldn't get you high? Is that why they're not illegal?
I think maybe it's because psilocybin by itself can be intense.
Also because growing mushrooms is not an easy task, guys. It's not.
It's not for the weak.
No, you've got to have all the right equipment.
Mm-hmm. So, because they became illegal, for almost 30 years, there was zero research allowed on this, like, at all. But it ended in 1997.
Oh.
The University of Zurich had a team of researchers find that the brain functions similarly to chronic schizophrenia on psilocybin.
What?
Yeah, because of the hallucinations and all that jazz. Isn't that crazy? That's wild, I know. But they also found that it increased brain activity. After this, many colleges started doing studies of their own and now are used to treat chronic pain, ranging from cluster headaches to neuralgia, which is a nerve pain in the face and head area. So, yeah.
That is
Pretty intense, huh? Yeah.
I didn't know that, like... Wow.
It's so crazy. I mean, it's crazy how far we've come, to be honest. You're crazy.
Crazy.
So it's definitely, there's a lot of history there, and I'm sure we could even go in more depths about different cultures and all that jazz, but I'm going to send it off to my co-host.
All right. So I think mine's going to be a little bit shorter than yours, but we'll see. I did not do any research on the history of the mushrooms, the magic mushrooms, because I wanted to leave that to lovely Kaya. However, I did do theories, and I was going to research one other theory, but I couldn't find, like, actual information on it, so I'm going to probably just quick read an article to you after I get into this. So let's
get into it.
Let's break it down, shall we? All right, so the first theory I have is the stoned ape theory or hypothesis, which they later came through. And that is the one that she mentioned McKenna earlier. And so this is his theory. But between 2.6 million to 11,700 million years ago, during the Pleistocene period, the evolution of Homo erectus to Homo sapiens occurred. And during this evolution, while our ancestors were migrating out of Africa, their brains tripled in size, they developed language, and they became executing more complex cognition. And obviously, like, a lot of people are like, what the hell?
Reasonably so.
What caused this to happen? And Terence McKenna did some research, and he came up with his own theory, and he later wrote a book on it in the 1960s. It is called Food of the Gods. And his theory was that psilocybin cubensis, a mushroom species known to grow in cattle dung, caused our ancestors to evolve into what humans are today, or Homo sapiens, which later, went down the line.
Evolution.
Yeah. And as our ancestors moved away from Africa, it was likely that they were to have eaten these mushrooms because, I'm sure on their trip there was some barren places and there wasn't very many options for food. And so, because they were also... they moved cattle. They were cattle herding nomads. And so McKenna's theory is that because psilocybin enhances creativity and radically elevates consciousness, these mushrooms helped accelerate our ancestors' evolution. Unlike Homo sapiens, the previous human species had smaller brain sizes, more muscle mass, and less verbal expression. So, the no brain, all brute, Yeah,
like mushroom that make me feel good.
Oh, yeah. Let's see, where am I? Homo sapiens also evolved various brain functions and a larger scope of consciousness. Oh. McKenna's theory signified that small doses of psilocybin improved visual keenness, or still does, I guess. Which would have meant that psilocybin improved early primate hunting abilities and food supplies, which also leads to evidence that suggests psilocybin decreases fear responses also, which would have improved our ancestors' hunting ability even more. It was claimed that this increase in food and nutrients correlated to higher levels of reproductive growth at somewhat higher doses. McKenna suggested that the mushrooms increase sexual arousal, leading to greater evolutionary advantages. However, it is argued that sexual arousal is a base-by-base case, depending on, who's taking the psilocybin.
So the mushrooms were getting everybody
and it also is argued that there's no studies that the libido is really affected by psilocybin. I didn't do any research on that, so I don't know if I really believe that, but he also claimed that at high doses, psilocybin would increase activity in the language-forming region of the brain, creating music and intricate dialect in our heads. Scientific research has shown that psilocybin increases connectivity in the brain between areas associated with problem solving, which could explain why it may improve cognition. It can also increase creative thinking, which may have prompted new behaviors in our ancestors that children and other group members would have learned and copied. Martha Allitt stated that epigenetic changes can be passed down from parent to child. And epigenetic changes are pretty much outside forces. So, like the environment.
So, basically, if your mom learns something new, it can be passed down to you, essentially?
Kind of.
Like evolution?
Yeah, a little bit. And anyway, psilocybin caused inheritable epigenetic changes in our ancestors. So activation of the 5-HT2A receptor in the brain can alter gene expression to increase processes associated with learning and memory. As psilocybin activates this receptor, it may be possible that these inherited gene expression changes could have helped increase our species' capacity to learn and memorize information. Psilocybin can evoke behaviors and traits that could have assisted our ancestors' survivability. Those who ate psilocybin cubensis may have been more likely to survive, reproduce, and pass down changes to their offspring through cultural inheritance and epigenetic changes. Consuming psilocybin cubensis could have also aided with the ancestors with problem solving and coming up with effective strategies for survival. And some could also argue that eating the psilocybin cubensis encouraged our ancestors to cooperate more with one another, both increasing survivability and making the start of human culture.
That's because everyone was high and chilled out.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're gonna get along.
And all the sentences are heightened because
Yeah, touching and shit is
Yeah.
super cool.
Oh yeah.
So like, of course they would like each other more. It's like, you know what,
Well,
you're not
like,
annoying the shit out
I
of me
guess
right
it
now.
helps your cognitive ability as well. And so like, I guess that would make sense as why our brains tripled in size then.
Yeah.
And then our next theory is the origin of Christianity and other religions. So the Amanita muscaria mushroom, which we mentioned during your story, has also been theorized to be the origin of Christianity. Amanita muscaria is the mushroom that causes you to grow, and like Mario Bros. Super cool mushroom, like gives you the one up. Not how it happens in real life, guys.
Don't eat it.
Don't do it.
If you're gonna do it right and drink the reindeer piss.
Be safe and responsible. So British archaeologist John Marco Allegro wrote a book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, which argues that Christianity arose from fertility cults that used psychedelic mushrooms as a gateway to God. He mentions on the fresco of Chapel of Plain Caralt, which he mentions on the fresco of the Chapel of Plain Caralt, so one of the art pieces in the chapel. There's a piece that depicts Adam, Eve, and the serpent along with a giant mushroom that looks to be the Amanita muscaria or very similar to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So in a picture.
What if the forbidden fruit was the magic mushroom? Just a thought.
Didn't mention that in the story, but it's possible. it's possible. Not story, but like in any of the articles I read, it didn't mention that.
Yeah, well.
But as we've come to learn, there's a lot of things in history that fake aren't right. We misconstrued. Anyways, obviously the scientific community generally rejected Allegro's book because they're like, religion did not start from your silly little mushroom. Whatever. And so... However, Brian Muraku, I'm going to say that's his name, Muraku, whatever. He wrote a book, and it's called The Immortality Key, and it brings light to similar claims to what Allegro claimed. His book hypothesized that Christianity grew out of the practices of pagan cultures, including drinking psychedelic wine, as Jesus was the equivalent of the Greek god of wine, Dionysus. I can't say his name, never can. Anyways, his followers would consume the wine to connect with him more powerfully and spiritually. Also, as it turns out, there is prevalence of mushrooms in early Christian art, and in these art pieces, it is not just like your everyday mushrooms or random mushrooms like chanterelles or... those are the only ones I can name off the top of my head. Anyways, it's specific mushrooms, and they contain multiple examples of both psilocybin cubensis and Amanita muscaria mushrooms. The amount of psychedelics that they found in the art was a good balance between the both of them, so it is hypothesized that both mushrooms were used fairly often. Mm-hmm. And a couple who were writing a thesis on this, Julie and Jerry Brown, had Paul Stamets, one of the world's most eminent mycologists, verify their analysis of the mushroom on the Green Man's Head in the Rosslyn Chapel to be taxonomically correct to the Amanita muscaria. And here's a picture of that for you. Yep, picture. In some pieces of art, the mushrooms were represented so clearly that ethnobotanists would have been able to tell what variety of psilocybin they were just off of that. And you can also find psilocybin and psychedelic datura plants in Egyptian art, and Amanita grows in Mount Oreb certain times of the year, which is a common place in some of the stories. I think it has a different name, but I didn't get that down because I suck. It also is present amongst the trees of Lebanon, and there's a quote that's in the book where Jesus says, "If you become my disciples and listen to my words, these stories will minister to you. For there are you 5 trees waiting for you in paradise that are undisturbed in summer and winter, and those leaves will not fall. Whoever will become acquainted with them will not experience death. So, what trees remain undisturbed throughout the year? It is evergreen trees. And these trees are host to Amanita muscaria, whose spores grow in the humus of decaying pine needles. There are other passages in the Bible where it's very clear that they bring cedars from Lebanon as well. So, there's that. Julie and Jerry noted that one wouldn't think about tree cultivation as a pathway to overcoming death, but it would make sense if they are the host for psilocybin mushrooms, especially in light of all the research showing how psilocybin experiences treat end-of-life anxiety by easing people's fear of death. They also noted that a turning point for them was when they visited the Church of Saint Martin de Vic in France, which was under the order of Benedictine monks. And on the choir wall was a fresco of Jesus entering Jerusalem and the greeting of... And those greeting him are not holding onto palm leaves, but they're holding onto psilocybin mushrooms. Yes. What? And on the other wall, there was a depiction of youth cutting through stems of large psilocybin mushrooms. And next to these 2 images, there's a depiction of the Last Supper. But instead of bread on the table in front of Jesus, it is mushroom calves. And it has the same knife as shown with the young boys cutting the stems.
I went to a Christian school. My principal's gonna shit his pants if he ever sees this.
Anyways, they could tell since during that time period that it was mushroom instead of bread, because if it was bread, it would be in loaves, and instead of them cutting it up, they'd be tearing it apart and passing it around. Where
was this in the Bible? I just need to know.
I'm sure there's passages that got misconstrued.
Government's hiding things.
Also, not to mention that in this drawing or in this painting, there were mushrooms embedded in the robes of the disciples sitting at the table with Jesus.
I don't know about you, but Jesus just became way cooler.
And if you were to look harder into the hands of the disciples, there are psilocybin mushrooms drawn on their hands too.
It kind of sounds like they were not necessarily worshiping this mushroom, but put it at a very high standard. If it was like,
well, hold on, it gets
everywhere.
I get further into it, actually.
Waiting for my pants to come right off.
Not only is it believed that Christianity originated with psilocybin, but Judaism and Islam also originated with it. The rejection of the theory that religion originated with shrooms is known as the Wasson-Panofsky interpretation.
Wasson, he was in my stuff.
Yeah. So Gordon Wasson was one of the best-known entheogenic scholars, and he rejected Allegro's work on the comment from an art historian, Erwin Panofsky, who claimed that the evidence Allegro was citing, specifically artwork in a 1291 CE French monastery, which depicted the Amanita muscaria, was in fact a stylized Christmas tree. However, it's argued that it looks nothing like a Christmas tree and absolutely like an Amanita muscaria.
Okay. Here's my question. How do you confuse a Christmas tree with a mushroom?
Maybe he took the oil painting and he was like, we're just gonna smudge.
We'll just make it taller. It's okay.
Smudge.
I know that these mushrooms have a complete flat top and long stems, but that right there, my guy, is a Christmas tree.
They were actually commonly drawn upside down in some of the pieces. Like the green man that I showed you, if you look at his head, it is upside down on his head.
Huh. And I wonder why they were drawn upside down.
I didn't get anything on
because that. Okay, so here's the thing is that some of the artwork that I have myself, so actually the artwork that I have, they were drawn
that looks like an
alien. Kind of like people.
They look like aliens, yeah.
But that does not look like a Christmas tree.
No, that very much looks like your stereotypical mushroom that people draw.
Yeah.
Like the most common one.
Yeah.
The basic red and white mushroom.
You can't get those.
Anyways, So, an author, J.R. Irwin, later re-examined the dissonance between the theories and actually went to visit the different monasteries and examine the artwork firsthand himself. Oh. And in Irwin's interpretation, Jesus did exist, and some of the relics in the Bible were code for psychedelias. For example, eat my flesh was not bread or anything of the sort, but rather a mushroom. The drink could also
have like a fleshy texture.
Yep, and the drink could also very well have been some form of DMT, which is just a speculation. However, if you were to look at it from the way Mesoamerica refers to the mushroom, it becomes a little more than speculation if you tie those two together.
You know what I'm imagining right now? At communion, when you have to eat the little cracker, instead you are eating a psychedelic mushroom and tripping all of church.
Yeah, and like, I grew up in the LDS church, and so, you know, during sacrament we had our little bread and we had our little water for his blood. So I'm just imagining, instead of eating bread, just microdosing on a cap or something, and then, you know,
church drinking would be way more fun.
Than drinking some DMT. Oh no! Literally every activity after church would be it. It would be it. But I would not have as many great lunches with my grandmother, and I think that would be very missed out on.
You know, I gotta say, washing your psilocybin down with some DMT wine just sounds like one hell of a time.
You know. You know, yeah, really. Maybe that's why there were a lot more cults back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people believing that they were otherworldly themselves for being on psychedelics.
Yeah, no wonder they were just washing their psychedelics down with psychedelics.
Anyways, it's stated by Reginald Reeford that he once took some mushrooms in the mountain. Like, this guy, he took mushrooms in the mountains of Oaxaca, where the shaman told him that the pre-Hispanic people of America referred to the mushroom as the piel de los dioses, which translates to the flesh of the gods. Yeah. Also, to stack onto Allegro's idea, the origins of most of the rites and rituals within the Christian religion has its origins in paganism, and pagans are worshippers of nature, and they frequently ate mushrooms like the Amanita muscaria.
That's true.
So that is what I have. However, I did want to talk a little bit about the theory where, so my roommate, Kai's younger sister, was telling me to add in how there's the theory that the government does not want us to have psychedelics because it shows us the real world. And I found an article, which I want you guys to check out sometime if you ever have the chance. I'll send the link to Kai and she can do her magic with it. But scientists studying psychoactive drugs accidentally proved the self is an illusion. So, I'll leave the story with that. The self is an illusion, guys.
What a lovely episode of I Was Thinking. I gotta say, I'm pretty proud of us for the very first episode. Just expect lots more bullshit to come from us along the way.
You know, this went a little shorter than I was expecting. We also were very unprepared. It's rough. It's rough. But you can find us on social media, and
all of it's going to be in the link in the description.
Yeah. So just like look up I Was Thinking, you'll probably find us.
Because we think about some random ass stuff, so we got to assume that other people do too. So stay safe, stay curious, stay nosy in Ned's case.
Yeah, stay nosy. Keep your nose in people's... Don't keep your nose in too much people's...
That can be unsafe.
Keep your nose in playful business, not business that harms you or others or the people that it is involving. Stay out of that. And don't cause drama. Don't stir the pot. We don't encourage that.
Anyways. Until next time! Bye!
Bye! Thank you! Suck my dick at 97.3.